This is a topic that gets me pretty fired up when I see very creative, what I call pushback terms, and it'll make my eyes twitch and my nostrils steam. So I suspect why we have so many people on today is I'm not alone in feeling the frustration of what our customers are doing to us. And so let's, without further ado, I always like to start out with the slide. Everybody, recognizes the far side, but the biggest thing with customer pushback terms, when you get in the damned if you do, you accept their terms and you're going to incur costs, or damn if you don't, or you decide, no, I'm not going to accept those terms, but you potentially can lose the customer. And that's what it's putting those of us in credit, especially in the construction industry, at a crossroads. What do we do? And I'm going to kind of start out here with a little bit of what I call history. And I'm going to define it as a credit manager, not as an attorney. We're going to go over a little bit of the history of where this generated, what time period it happened, because I find if you know historically what created these pushback terms, it helps you navigate with your customers when they're approaching you. Give you some examples of the good, the bad, ugly, and ludicrous of terms. And then we're going to go over what I call the math. That thing that you need to go back to your C-suite, your managers, and going, here are the true costs of what it takes if we accept these new terms that the customers are
Ugly and
forcing on us.
ludicrous.
I'm sorry, what was that, Diane? Oh, sorry. Okay. We're also going to discuss, what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly of billing portals. Some do very good for us, and others are extremely costly. So you got to calculate the cost. You got to show your upper management what it's costing, so you can make decisions that benefit your company and hopefully your customer. And you just have to determine how far do you allow those terms to work with your company. So my quick definition, I call it the act of forcing the creditor to accept the debtor's payment terms in order for them to restructure or fund their own internal projects in lieu of borrowing from the bank. And I don't know if anybody's been on back when people would get lines of credit to pay their obligations. That has changed. Very few companies use lines of credit to pay their creditors. And why they're pushing it on us is banks will charge interest, late penalty fees. They come to us as creditors like, well, we're going to pay you, let's say net 90, and you can't charge us any late fees or interest. So they're kind of redirecting the terms of using your company's money before they pay it back. And I have a colleague, Chris Birdwell, who always called it calculated extortion. And I just love it. So I always quote him on that. So I don't know if anybody on the call today remembers what I call the 2007 to 2009, what we call the mortgage crisis, right? This is historically what I call an event that reset the scales. We had WAMU was the largest failed bank in U.S. history. Lehman Brothers was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. CIT was the largest prepackaged bankruptcy ever filed. And then those may not remember, but GMC and Chrysler applied for a $17 billion federal bailout because the car industry was hugely impacted because not only were people losing their houses, but they couldn't afford cars any longer. And because of this time period, that's when lines of credit virtually disappeared overnight. The banks were freaked out. The feds were coming in and seizing. And so the first thing that went away were a line of credit. And then they were forcing companies to reapply, and they were not granting the same level lines of credits that they used to get. So that put them in a really hard handicap because our customers would borrow, pay us, and they would wait then for their funds to come in. So they were paying before they got paid. That pretty much disappeared. Then I have some quotes that really made my blood boil. So David Rosenbaum, who's a CFO at Argyle Company, this was back in 2013, and he was asked about, hey, you guys have changed your payment terms. And he was mentioning, yeah, finance departments, they had pressure to improve their working capital. They no longer had lines of credit. And so they were in that, hey, if we hold on to our money longer, then we will feel safer. Because, back in 07, 08, everybody was freaking out. They didn't want to pay their bills quickly any longer because that meant dipping into reserves, taking money away from new product development. Plus, there was a big time of mergers and acquisitions occurring, and so they were really, feeling that debt stress. And then he also talked about, okay, it was either we dip into our reserves, possibly injuring ourselves. We don't want to do lines of credit anymore because it's got too expensive. And they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so what they went through is they talked about, okay, Argyle Company owns so many acquired entities, and they went from asking permission to telling, we are changing our terms. We are no longer paying your terms, XYZ creditor. What works for us is we're going to change our terms to 60 or 90 and sometimes beyond, depending on their industry. And I love that. This is his quote. To his surprise, it worked. So they went from pre 2007 afraid to ask creditors for extended terms to suddenly demanding them. And everybody knows who Kellogg is. And so Chris Charles had written that their supply chain financing program, they went to extending payments to 120 days. This was in 07. I mean, it's pretty shocking that they used that economic time to just pivot and go, okay, this is what we're going to do. But what made my blood boil is how it gave Kellogg, and then she included, and our suppliers more flexibility to manage their business. How does this help a supplier? You just told us that you're no longer going to pay us by our terms. You're putting us out 120. There is absolutely no benefit to a supplier. But I love that she quoted saying that it did help our suppliers. Pushback terms, there are no good pushback terms. I'm sorry, there just are none. But then I have some examples of the bad. There are some industries that created this, what we call end of accumulation period. I don't know if anybody on the call has run into these terms, but the concept is they are collecting all of your invoices up through a particular date. The company that did it to us, for them, it was the 5th day of the month. So any invoices from the 6th of the month before to the 5th of the current month were accumulated. So stay with me on that. And they would batch said accumulated invoices. So they would include it as a batch, and they would age the batch. So they wouldn't pay that batch until net 90s from that end of accumulation. And so the 120 initially sounded good until you start doing the math. So here are an example. So if your invoices are dated May 5th through June 4th, there's your accumulation period. So you got 30 days worth of invoices. The accumulation period starts on June 4th. They pay net 90s from June 4th, meaning you're not paid until September 2nd. So they're playing, some what I call creative math on you. So if you've got invoices in May through June, you're going now from 91 to 121 days, depending on when those invoices were billed, batched, and actually paid. And then we have an aeronautical company here in Seattle. I'm not going to say their name, but I'm pretty sure you can guess who it is. They had created their portal during this time. The portal is extremely expensive to use. And on top of that, they converted and said, okay, now we're going to pay you by credit card as well. So when you look at the costs, this was one of the changes in their billing terms. We only pay the 1st or the 15th of the month. So their plan is like, okay, we're only paying our suppliers twice a month after the invoices are 90 days old. Hopefully everybody's with me so far. So the countdown doesn't start until you actually submit the invoice in their portal. This may
Olivia, what is your problem?
not. Uh, and then I always mention that you get your PO through the portal, you invoice through the portal. It all sounds great, but what if you're not getting your POs timely from your customer? And the way their portal works, you can't backdate any invoices you bill. You are only allowed to bill the day you submit that invoice, regardless of how old that invoice is. So again, they're playing some more math games on you. Best case scenario, any invoices dated from the first of the month. If you're at net 90, your net 90 days end on July 29th. Credit card is released on August 1st. So your actual days to pay are 93. That's what I call a best case scenario. The worst case, a few days later, May 4th, your net 90 is now August 2nd, and your credit card payment's not released to August 15th. So they've again extended their payment terms on you. And these are the kind of the date, I call math dating, that you need to prepare when you're having those conversations with your employer, because this costs money. You know, when everybody's coming to the credit manager and they want financial forecasting, and you're dealing with a supplier, or excuse me, a business that pays this way, you really have to get creative in Excel in order to do some genuine financial forecasting on when you're going to get your funds, what the amounts will be, etc. So in this case, you're now at 104 days with an invoice that's only dated 3 days later. And then we have the ugly. I call these ransom terms. They come to you and they tell you, our terms are 2% 45 or net 90. I have several industries in the manufacturing that use this frequently, and you get to choose. You either allow the 2% 45 days or the net 90. Again, this is a mathematical game. They're holding you ransom, and you have to decide, do I want to wait net 90 and get all my money, or do I want to accept the 2% discount on what they're paying? And then we had a manufacturer do this to us, and I nicknamed it Dirty Dog Extortion. They gave us a PO, and they said, we're taking 2% on 10 days, not 30. Okay, that's pretty decent. The check would arrive, and they'd have a remittance. It would have the gross value of our invoice, the 2% discount they were taking, and the net value. Well, in the state of Oregon, for those who don't know, there is no sales tax in Oregon. So when you have an invoice that ends in 00 and you take 2%, you're going to have an even number of what that 2% should look like. What we discovered is this particular company was using a generator, and they would actually take anywhere from 2.1 to 2.4%. And it was random. And like when we were getting our check remittances, each one was at a different percent value, anywhere from 2.1 to 2.4. So they were taking slightly more than 2%. And of course, we're going to notice when you're paying my Oregon non-sales tax invoices. And here's an example. One of the invoices they paid was $8,700. The 2% should have been $174. But what they actually took was $208.80. Well, that's going to show up glaringly because there's no way I should get that 80 cents on a 2% discount. And when you reverse out engineer it, they took 2.4% and then denied it when we confronted them. So here's where my frustration was. They took an additional $34.80 on this one single invoice. This was a very large customer of ours, so it was multiple invoices throughout the year. And here's my comment. Think about this customer doing it to all of their suppliers, adding this 2.1 to 2.4% discount and hoping you're not going to notice it. That's a lot of revenue that they generated for themselves. They took way more than what the 2% was. And I'm pretty sure everybody on this call in the construction industry has dealt with paid when paid or paid if paid. And this is an extremely dangerous legal position for your company to be in. What it's basically saying is your customer is not going to pay you until they've been paid on their job. And they'll write it in the purchase order, they'll write it in the contract. However they do, they're putting it onto you to accept these terms. The best case scenario, they'll get paid and you'll get paid. That's the hope, right? You're taking this risk. The problem is, let's say they don't get paid for 6 months. That means they don't have to pay you for 6 months. That's a cost to your company. You're now waiting for that customer to get their funds and in turn pay you. And I know what's really cool with BuildingBlocks and Handle with all their lean software, you have the ability to work your lien releases and protect yourselves from these types of terms. So that's what I call best case scenario. But here's the worst case. What if the lender on the project goes bankrupt and your customer never gets paid? And you've accepted paid when paid or paid if paid. Legally speaking, you have no rights to go after your customer. This is why it is a horrible condition put on us in the construction trade industry. It's also why my company never accepts it. The moment we get any kind of email, phone call that says paid when paid, paid if paid, we shut their account down immediately and we demand that they resend those terms in writing to us. We absolutely will not allow ourselves to be in a situation of never being paid or exercising our lien rights. So it's super important that you have those conversations with your upper management about if this happens, what are your recourse? You need to be able to kick it back and go, we can't accept that. It prevents us from having lien rights and protecting ourselves on that. All right. And then I kind of add that special note, you're relying on your customer's ability to work for a financially solvent client, and you don't get to review their contract with their client. You don't know if their client is financially able to pay. So why would you want your company to be in a situation of paid when paid or paid if paid? And then another situation that occurs, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen these, I call them back charges or deductions to your supplier payment, such as big box stores. I know a lot of suppliers sell their construction materials to our big box stores across the United States. And these big box stores have a habit of making deductions but not providing a backup. And when you, as the creditor, call and you're like, hey, you took a deduction, some of them will charge your company $120 for their own in-house labor to provide you the backup for their deduction. So they charge you to research a deduction they took. And it's my mind is blown when I see this. Box stores will also do what's called lumper fees. And for those that aren't familiar with that, it has to do if you've drop shipped materials, supplies, and it's not a full pallet. These big box stores are going to deduct you to unload that pallet. It's mind blowing. And I see it not just in the construction supply industry, I see it in the food industry. And anytime that you're supplying items that are on a pallet and it's a partial pallet, they are creating back charges for that. And you're just like, how can that be? You only ordered a partial pallet. But this is their way. Remember, they're siphoning off and trying to save money anywhere they can. Some of the big box stores will also do what's called an anticipatory discount, which means they are anticipating that the stuff that you supply to them is going to have some level of bad product. And so they will pre-take a 2% discount for bad product. Whether you had sent them bad product or not, they don't care. They just anticipate that there's going to be bad product, and this is their way of not having to deal with returns. So they just take it regardless of any defects. And this insanely preposterous example truly happened. I have quoted this customer that sent us this very letter, and this was done about 8 years ago. So the first thing they said is, we're going to reduce the price that you have quoted us by 18%. Right off the top, we're taking our price, we had it on contract, we're reducing you by 18%. And they only gave us 30 days. And it had to be on our most current pricing. And so they were basically saying you can't turn around and change the pricing in the next 30 days. This 18% is going to be deducted from the pricing you quoted us when we put in our contract. And they were going to require this discount for the next 12 months. But wait, there's more. They moved all the supplier payments to net 90. And they actually used the words for ease of processing. And I'm like, give me a break. I was just stunned when I saw it. I couldn't stop laughing. I had never seen a letter like this. The other thing they did is they took away all their ACH, EFT, and wire transfer payments. They revoked them and went to check, snail mail. Well, the only reason you do that is to float money, right? If you're paying a supplier that's in Seattle, Washington, and you make sure that you ship that check from Florida, you've bought yourself another week's worth of time, especially now that the post office isn't nearly what they used to be. They're saving that time of floating the money. That's the whole only reason for doing that. Guess what? This signals that they're in financial distress. So all payments were by check, and they were going to welcome longer term pricing strategies with our company. And I'm going to put a pin on that because I'm going to follow up with you on what we did with that customer. But right now, we're going to kind of go into the billing portals. I know a lot of us are getting hammered with all these billing portals, but I need to kind of make sure you all understand that these have been around since the 1990s. I mean, a lot of times we get a billing portal, we think it's brand new, never heard of it. But some of the ones I'm going to show you, and keep in mind, every single one I'm showing you, we are on. So we have a lot of billing portals that we work with. And then people ask, well, why? Well, the biggest reason is for the buyer, our customer, it's a lot less expensive, if not free to them, right? So these portals are going to your customers. And they're like, hey, we can do all this stuff for you. We can manage your costs on your projects. We can manage how purchase orders are distributed to your suppliers. And we're going to offer it to you for free. And then if you're the buyer, you're like, oh, well, that sounds like a good deal because guess what? I no longer have to have an IT department manage my own portal. Back in the 90s and up to 2010, people had their own on-site portals for their businesses. It's pretty important to know. And now you got these portals approaching, oh, well, we can do it for you for free. And they're like, ah. And yes, there are some portals that are free to suppliers. I don't yet get how they make their money, but I still have some that are very free. Some of the portals will offer early pay discounts. And what's interesting about that, the discount comes from the portal and not your customer. So if you've done an invoice and it's within terms with your customer, and let's say those terms are net 30, it can stay net 30. The customer, submits the payment, you get the full percentage on your terms. But along comes these portals and they're like, well, if you want to get paid earlier, we'll offer you a 2% discount. So what they're doing is they've got the 100% from your client and they pay you the 98%. So they made a 2% profit paying you earlier because they've already got the money. So I hope that kind of makes sense on how they're making their money off an early pay. So the early pay discounts through a portal are often the discount offered by the portal, not your customer. So you have to figure out which one that is. A lot of subscription costs and transaction fees. And so there's differences. Sometimes the subscription pays for everything. Sometimes you have a subscription and each time you touch a purchase order, you get a transaction fee. All right, and then I'm just going to discuss if you've done any government contracting. Right now it's called PIEE, PI. I think the federal government pays their people to create interesting acronyms for their billing portals. It used to be IRAP, used to be WAF, and they go through. And my cautionary, most government contracts at the federal level, you have to use their portal to go through. It doesn't cost anything. It's free, but it's probably the most difficult portal to deal with when you're doing government. I also recommend, if you are using their Pi portal, you create what's called a pro forma invoice. And what that means is an invoice, like I've got an Excel one that we use for our branches where they can fill out everything that meets what the contract requires. Most of our rental invoices don't have all the right language. And by right language, like ours will say contract instead of invoice. They don't like overlapping billing periods if you're billing on a monthly basis. So we've learned we just create the invoice with the right information and use that as our invoice. And that's what I mean by pro forma. You'll find it a lot easier to get those bills accepted and approved than if you're trying to use one that's a default from your company. Another free portal is Coupa. And we use them a lot. We have at least 15 customers that go through Coupa and look at founded in 2006, and so far they're still free. They've not come back and tried to charge. And Coupa is very easy to navigate. There's other free portals. TradeShift was founded in 2010, and you can see they deal with a lot of big global companies. And so far, they're free. I haven't run into any problems with them. Talia is another free, and they're the ones that I made that example of. They offer an early pay discount, but it's their discount, not your customer's discount. So you just, as a business, have to decide if you want to accept it and get that cash up front or wait for the terms. But as you can see, they represent a lot of big companies out there. And then C2FO, I don't see them as often. They were really big at one point, and then their presence seems to have dropped. So I'm not sure what's going on with them. But again, fairly easy to navigate, get through. And then we get what I call your membership transaction volume. And my biggest example is my ExoStar. They deal with all your big aeronautical companies out there. And it was originally built by Lockheed Martin. So that's an example of what I mean by aeronautical, and Boeing and Raytheon. But they've since sold it, and it's now owned by an investment company. And I kind of gave you an example page of, they always come out and say, oh, it's free, but up to a certain amount. And then they give you all these different levels. I have never been able to mathematically calculate their invoicing to us, because we have more than one customer that uses this, and depending on the month we're at different levels. Sometimes we're bronze, sometimes we're gold. It's always based on the volume for that month, so it vacillates. And then they also do, it's called an annual one-time token generator that you have to pay for, so don't forget that's at a cost that you need to add. And then I'm pretty sure everybody on here is familiar with Ariba. We've been on it for a very long time, but they're old. They're from 1996. And when you're in their portal, they look like they're from 1996. They have not done a good job updating their portal for what I call modern day. And this was an example. I did change the name of the company that was converting to this portal, but I named it to John Doe. But this is the exact verbiage. It's free. Register for a free account. No, it's not. You will get billed, because they do their fees based on financial volume. They have a subscription fees on the number of documents. And by documents, I'm talking about purchase orders. So if you're doing multiple purchase orders for a big company, you're getting billed for every single document and every time you touch that document. So if you do an invoice and you're invoicing monthly, or as you've like, okay, we've got 100 widgets out of the 200 they ordered, and you ship and bill, you get billed for that. If you have to do credit, you get billed for that. So every single time you touch a PO in Ariba, they got a little ticker tape, and they're building that up on you. And then I have my beware of Trojan horses. This one in particular they start out as free, They put in a bunch of clients and then they turn around and go, okay, now you're going to get charged. So the one that probably made my eyeballs twitch the most is Bank of America came out with pay mode in 2004. And all it was at that time was a place to dump remittances. So if you're getting an ACH payment, Bank of America, under the name of pay mode, would put a remittance in the portal. You'd log into the portal, download the remittance for that payment. Pretty easy. But then they sold it. And then it was free still until 2015. Then they came out, they did an upgrade version of it called Pay Mode X. And now they're charging you for the remittances. And this is where I really, it's hard not to laugh because they were like, oh, we're going to charge you 1.5% for all of your remittances. So if we have a customer that paid us 50,000 ACH, right? ACH is free, but you have to log in to get the remittance. Well, we're going to charge you 1.5% of that $50,000 remittance. And I said, we have at least 15 customers on this. And I'm like, why would I pay 1.5% for a remittance that can be easily emailed? And so as a company, we refused to go to their upscale program. And the sales rep was like, well, it's cheaper than accepting credit cards. I'm like, a lot of our customers that pay ACH are paying $100,000 and $200,000. I'm not paying you 1.5% of a $200,000 remittance. No, not going to happen. So we still have those 15 original customers on the original pay mode. We're still able to access that. We've never upgraded to pay mode X. And every 2 years they call and try to convince me to change. And I always go, well, are you still charging 1.5% for a remittance? And if it's so, I'm not interested in. Another Trojan horse that really frustrates me is our customers are using their bank's portal to pay, right? They're like, I want to pay Star Rentals, I want to pay Bottom Line. You know, they have all these companies that they pay. And the money comes out of that customer's checking account. But then these third-party transaction companies turn around and go, okay, well, we're going to pay Star Rentals a credit card. We took the money from the customer, but hey, Star Rentals, we're giving you the credit card version. So they get to keep that full ACH transaction, and then they charge us 3% for that credit card transaction. And this is super frustrating. A lot of customers are not aware that their cash that came out of their bank account has been converted to a credit card to their supplier. Some are aware, depending on the third-party portal that's using that bank app. Some are not. And so we are very careful on when we allow this. And I will say, if you know you're not going to accept credit card and you go back to the customer, they're usually quite upset. They're like, all that money came out of my bank account. What do you mean you're getting a credit card? They're usually very upset. And all right, this is my biggest nemesis right here, Corpay. They have purchased so many of these third-party banking platforms, and they are aggressive in converting cash into credit cards. And this is their actual merchant agreement they tried to send me, or actually they sent it to me, I refused to sign it. But they're explaining that, hey, we charge you 2.9% when you opt to use it for paying your customers. And they are, as I said, they've bought so many third-party banking apps and they're super aggressive. That it's really hard to stay on top of it. So just, be aware. I will say Corpay tried to counter with 1.5 transaction fee, which I looked at, but when I looked at the contract, that 1.5 was also going to be off of ACH. So they were going to reduce the credit card fee to 1.5, but now they're charging for every electronic transaction and not just credit card. So I have not elected to do that. And my favorite little faceplant elephant. So what should you do? You're protecting your company's receivables, the assets, and my best advice: don't ignore the elephant. It will grow and get bigger. All right. So first thing you got to do, you got to show your upper management the money. Well, what does that mean? Our company spent a lot of time when they're coming up with a pricing strategy, going after our clients, say, okay, here's our pricing strategy. We can offer you this discounted price on the product that we are supplying. So they spent a lot of time doing what they call an acceptable profit margin for various volume customers, right? The higher the volume, you tend to charge less. So your margins are narrow, but you're banking on volume to make up for that. Your cost of goods sold. So, like my president, they spent a lot of time on cost of goods sold. We have to rent the equipment. It's got to be maintained. We've got mechanics, overhead, all of that. What is the true cost when we put a unit on rent? But they don't often remember to think about the cost to collect. And this is a conversation I have all the time with our president and two vice presidents. We discuss this relentlessly because of the portals, because of the credit cards and all the additional discounting. So what does that mean for you guys? Well, one of the things for getting paid are those customers that are doing credit card payments. I do know in the construction industry, in the supply side, a lot of them don't take credit cards because their profit margins are super slim, especially the lumber industry. Some will accept a swiped or card present because that percentage is considerably less than an offline transaction. But these are costs that upper management often doesn't include when they're putting their pricing structure together. So if you got a customer who's paying with a card, you got to add that percentage in. What I call billing portal membership fees. I keep a running tab on my Ariba because we have a lot of customers that use it. Every time I get their quarterly billing, I'm keeping a running fee because we need to know what that is costing us to transact for that customer. And this is your membership fees, your transaction fees, any third-party tokens. Thankfully, the third-party tokens are kind of going away because they're doing third-party authentication through like a phone, a text, where they authenticate that you are who you say you are. But then there's the additional staff hours in managing billing portals. At our company, we got 6 credit managers. We assign customers regionally, alphabetically. So if one of our credit managers has a customer that's on that portal, they are trained in how to use that portal, but it is extra time. And we have certain high volume customers. It takes a lot of time because you got to bill every single individual PO. So that's something you need to manage. How long does it take a person in your company to manage the portal? And then don't forget the early pay discounts, throw in there. If there's any back charges, unauthorized deductions, or rebates. And rebates, we do a rebate program, and that has to be calculated in our cost. So I did a quick little Excel here where I'm like, okay, let's pretend that you're going to do 3 million with this one customer, right? That's our customer gross sales. And you're hoping to get a profit of 8%. So that's saying of a $3 million customer, you expect to get $240,000 in your profit. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's a good profit. But then you need to add in, what does that portal transaction fee? What is the portal fee? And in my example, it's 1.5. So now you have an additional cost of $3,600 a year for that customer to transact in the portal. There's subscription fee, another $2,250. So your additional costs come to $11,310 so far. And then don't forget your staff labor. I just said, oh, let's pretend it's 7 hours a week to manage the portal. So per year, that's 5,460. Now you've gone from making 240,000 to only 228,000. This was what I mean by showing your company the math. You're like, okay, because I can ask of this customer, what is our profit that you've built into it? And, I'll get an answer. And then I throw these additional costs. Are you aware that we have this, that, and the other? So your profit is no longer 8%. It's actually 6.4%. And this is that conversation that you need to have with your C-suite or your sales manager, whoever is in charge of pricing for a customer. you got to make sure to add those in. So this was kind of like just a simple portal cost. And then I did what I call like a worst case scenario. Let's say you had a 3 million customer, 10% profit, who also decides to pay by credit card. So now you're at 2.5% for your credit card per year, portal fee, subscription fee. What if they take an early pay discount on top of all of that? And we have a customer that hits most of these. They get an annual rebate plus our AR staff. So you've gone from a 10% profit down to 1.7. And I call this a worst case scenario, but we do have a customer that fits all of these. And your company needs to know that you're not making as much money as you think, and then you need to relook at your pricing. All right. All right. And remember my customer, my insanely preposterous. Well, that letter came from their accounts payable corporate department. It was a generic letter that they sent out to every single supplier trade relationship that they had. They didn't care that we were on contract and that we had a rebate program tied into this contract. And that rebate program was based on volume. When they reached certain tiers, they got higher rebate volumes. And it was based on timely payments. So when we got this letter, we immediately closed their account and threatened to withdraw. And we had hundreds of pieces of equipment. And I'm talking, excavators, scissor lifts, anything that you can imagine on a construction site. This was a huge company. And we're like, oh, hell no. No. We are going to do this, that, or the other. We're going to close your account. We're going to pick up equipment within 30 days. And specifically, if you don't rescind the terms in writing, we are not going to accept a verbal. It has to be in writing that you're, rescinding that letter your AP sent out. So here's the good news. They liked the rebate program we had. We were immediately going to withdraw that. It was a lot of money to them every single year. So they reinstated our original contract in writing. And because they wanted to protect this from happening to us again, they gave us national vendor status. So with this particular customer of ours, when they put a customer on national vendor status, accounts payable can no longer monkey with the payment terms. So this is their way of preventing this from happening in the future. And guess what? They just recently reinstated their ACH EFT. So this, what could have been a horrible, deplorable situation, turned out to still be a really good company. And I also want to go back to this national vendor status. When they did that, it allowed all of their other entities to transact with us. And part of that was to guarantee the rate of our rental and the rebate. So we ended up opening several more accounts for this customer that all fall into the rebate program and the discounted rate. And guess what? They pay us very promptly. Oh, remember our paid when paid or paid if paid. My best recommendation, don't accept it. I know in the construction industry, that is how they pay. Just don't let them put it in writing on you. If they do it in writing, you need to get them to rescind it because you don't want to give up your lien rights. Every state has a different timeline for when you can record a lien and protect your company for being paid. If you've agreed in writing to paid when paid, you're in a way giving up your ability to protect your company's lien rights. So it's just policy across our entire company. The moment somebody emails us in writing or crosses it off our credit app and puts paid when paid, we kick it back. Oh, your account's closed. You have to rescind these terms if you want to continue renting from us because our terms are this, that, and the other. We're very clear. We do add, we can work with you on these projects. We understand the nature of the construction industry, but the minute you put in writing paid when paid, we close your account. So I'm hoping you kind of get, it's a gray area to say we'll work with you, but don't you dare put it and commit us to a written language of paid when paid or paid if paid. And then, like I said, we like to make sure they make reasonable payment schedules. We do know some of these projects, especially public works, I don't know why they've gotten way worse at paying. We get that. We'll work with you, but don't say you're going to pay us when paid, because then you immediately will get your account closed. So hopefully you see the difference. All right, credit cards. A lot of credit managers don't realize, or I should say businesses, that you can have classifications of your customers. For example, Star Rentals, we have a tier rate discount program, and that is based on how much volume and payment terms. You have to pay prompt and have a certain level of volume with us to get this particular tier level rate. That is a classification. And when we put that tier level, it is coded onto their account. So they get the exact same rate as every one of our customers that has that same tier level discount. So it's universal. We can prove what the rates are and that it's identical to this classification of customer. And why I say that is you can treat different classifications of customers differently than other classifications. Like I know credit managers, like if you're a cash customer and you walk in and pay, we can charge more for that product than if you're set up as a high volume discount, where you're guaranteed and you're locked in. And this is super important. And because I'll get back to my core pay warfare. So the Robinson-Patman Act and the Sherman Antitrust protect your company when you are protecting your classification of customers. Low volume accounts can be billed differently than high volume accounts. And as long as you're consistent, in other words, those customers within our tier level are all treated alike. They're all given the exact same discount package and they're all given the exact same payment terms on when a payment is due. This is super important because I have this tiered rate, and this is our corporate, this is our president and vice presidents. We've all agreed. If our customer is a tier level account, we do not allow them to pay by credit card. That is protected by the Robinson-Patman Act. So every customer, and we have a lot of customers on that tier level, we do not allow them to pay by credit card. We're very clear because our discount is so high, our profit is so low, we cannot afford to also take a 3% hit on a credit card fee. And the reason I bring this up is Corpay tries to do it to everybody. And when I tell them our tier level customers are not allowed to pay by credit card, they argue with me. And they're like, well, show, they go into like, if you accept MasterCard, then you have to take MasterCard for every single customer that wants to pay it. And I'm like, oh no, you do not understand this. So I'm going to give you a copy of the letter. I actually have this queued in as a signature block because it happens so frequently with Corpay. And I actually send them this email and explain it's protected by the Robinson-Patman Act. I don't accept credit cards on this tier level account. And I've run this by a very prominent attorney out of New York to make sure that how this is written protects Star Rentals. But it's a warfare every time when Corpay tries to convert a customer into payment. So hopefully I've let that slide up enough for everybody to read. If anybody wants to at the end and you want this, like I said, it's the signature block. I could just hit the signature block and send it to you. So beware. I have this happen at our company. These third-party headhunters, we have 18 branches. They'll call randomly, go, hey, do you guys take credit card for payment? And of course the branch is like, yeah, because we do. We have cash customers, we have low-level volume customers. We take credit cards from pretty much everybody except our tier level. And when they hear that, then they immediately think they have permission to convert a customer to credit card. Okay. They also may change and go, hey, does your company accept MasterCard, Visa? Or they're calling on behalf of a customer we know. Hey, I'm calling on behalf of ABC to find out if you accept credit cards. Our branches are not as well versed in our credit card acceptance policy. And this was getting so outrageous because they would claim, well, we got permission to convert this customer. And I'm like, oh no, just using a third party to randomly call is not legal. And so I had to train all my branches. If they get asked about credit cards, they have to forward that to someone in our credit department. They are not allowed to answer that question because it depends on the customer. All right, and I think I see some questions popping up, Chris, on the chat. Are there any
Yes.
that I need to answer?
Um, Mostly just comments. Some people did mention that yes, please, and that would be great for what you just mentioned. Uh,
Okay.
Stephanie and Pamela said that, so that would be great. And then Julie said, please send one to me as well, Heidi. So definitely a lot of, oh, and Beth as well. Please send letter for
Okay.
tier and Corpay. So lots of interest there for sure.
Would it be better if I just send that to you, Chris, because you've got the email list of all the attendees? You
Yeah,
want to just send
yeah,
it out? Okay.
yeah. If you're good, I can just send it to all the
Yeah.
attendees. I already have them marked down and everything, so that way we can
Yeah.
shoot an email off later today.
No, I'm totally good with that. It's not copyrighted or, protected. It's a letter I created, ran it by an attorney to make sure we were protected as our company. If you guys want to use that, I recommend you run it by your company's attorneys to make sure it matches what you guys are doing.
Perfect. And
Okay,
also, we do have a quick question as well. It
certainly.
says, how much does your competition affect how well you can or cannot be successful in these pushbacks?
Well, here's what's interesting. We do have some very large competitors. Star Rentals, I would say, is probably mid-sized to small compared to the national competitors that are out there. But they charge for things that we do not. So when we are working on, our pricing with our customers and whether we take credit card or not, we're very clear on that. Um, we try not to say, well, so and so competitor does this. They usually see it on their invoicing when they're getting all these little extra charges that Star Rentals is like, no, we don't charge that. A lot of our competitors do take credit card, but they charge for the credit card, as a surcharge, which is legal and depending on the state. Again, run that by your attorney. And so they're not out that money when they surcharge for credit card use. And you will find if your company does do the surcharging, um, my frenemy Corpay will pull out. They will not do third party if their client gets surcharged for using a credit card. So that's one way of getting out of it. So we just kind of point out, if you're not a tier level customer and we do take credit card, we don't charge. We just accept that as a cost of doing business. So that gives us an edge over our competitors who do charge. So sometimes you just got to be clear on where they're saving versus not. Are there any other questions?
No, just a lot of points. Oh, they did ask, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? Are you good with that, Heidi, if I send that
Oh
out
yeah,
along with the letter?
I'll send it as a PDF slide deck if that's easier
Yep.
because
Yeah, you can just send me
it's
that and
less
then
kilobytes.
perfect. Yeah, that and the
Yeah,
letter would be great, and I can make sure all the attendees get that. Um,
and the letter will be in the slide deck. So
oh,
we'll just do
perfect.
the PDF and I'll slap that out to everybody.
Okay, great.
Okay.
You're getting
So
lots of praise and thanks. Everyone was saying great presentation. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so
yeah, and I'm pretty much done. Just the summary. When you're, dealing with math, know your math, know what the portals charge, the membership fees, if you're offering discounts or rebates, credit card acceptance, and what I call customer add-on fees. You just got to be able to put that all in a spreadsheet to really tell so that your company understands what the true cost is. And are we making money or aren't we making money? And that's my best advice I can give you. Have those conversations. I have them all the time with our president and two vice presidents, and I'm explaining the costs on what we do and why we do it. Because if they have knowledge, then they're able to repeat it with our customers. And then a little, if you're paying really good, we're going to cancel your card because we're not making any money off of you. And so I want to just once again thank Building Blocks and Handle.com for having me today.